Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. Today we're going to be taking a look at a video that disgusted me. Now when I say this, I do not mean that I merely disagreed with the video, I mean I was disgusted by the video in question. We're looking at a video by a channel called Actually Interesting, called Why It Sucked to Be a Medieval Nun. This video is a 6-minute long, massive strawman fallacy. It tells us an anecdotal story of what a nun's life looked like in medieval Europe without providing the slightest shred of evidence or a source for us to draw from. This video was as ignorant, backhanded, and dishonest as one could possibly be when discussing medieval history, or history in general for that matter. But what's worse is that I think there's something far darker going on underneath it all. See, while watching this video and doing my research around it, I noticed some very disturbing evidence of what may be turning into a rapidly growing trend on YouTube concerning historically based content. But we'll talk more about that at the end, okay? We'll save that for the end. I just want to focus on this video for now. Let's focus on what's right in front of us. So, before we get started, I better change out my avatar, and luckily Hannah already has the perfect image for my avatar for this video. There we go. And now, let's take a look at this disgusting video.
You were born in medieval England, 1240 AD, into a family with a father who was more married to ale than to his duties.
So, the video starts by asking us, the listener, to step into the life of a young girl in medieval England in the 13th century. And that's not a bad idea to open with, and I'm glad to do it. But right now, we need more information to make this work. Like, for example, you say my father was more married to ale than to his duties. Well, what duties did he have? Who is my father in this circumstance? Is he a serf? Is he a farmer? Is he a layman? See, this requires context to better understand who he is and what my position in society is, because that will come into play later. But let's keep going and see where he goes with this.
He loved his 5 daughters in his own strange way, but love didn't put food on the table or save dowry money. You were the second youngest, and by the time you reached 15, everyone in the village knew you were the most beautiful of them all. A powerful general in the king's army even noticed you, declared he wanted to marry you. But his family demanded dowry, a dowry so heavy it could sink a ship.
This here is a misunderstanding of marriage in the medieval age. Now, if this is a prominent general in King Henry's army, and I say King Henry because King Henry III would be ruling right now, if this is 1240, as you said, so this is all during the reign of King Henry III, so it would be one of his generals, but I digress. If this is a high-ranking general in King Henry's army, he would already have a planned marriage in place for himself. See, for nobility or high-ranking knights and lords and nobles, marriage was more of a political thing than it was based on love and courtship. Usually, children were married. Like, they'd already have a plan on, okay, by the time you're 6 years old, it's like, all right, you're going to marry this woman or she's going to marry this guy because we're building political alliances between our families and our clans and stuff like that. Ironically, peasant romances were far more built on courtship and freedom than the nobility was because there was not that expectation of a political alliance. So it would be more public. It'd be more mature. You'd actually see a young woman and a young man actually building a relationship together. So this idea of this noble suddenly sees this woman and wants to marry her out of love, you probably wouldn't see that for several reasons. One being, he would know it's not likely going to happen. His family probably wouldn't approve of it, and he already has someone that he's destined to marry. For second, he would know that the wife's family probably couldn't pay the dowry that would be necessary to make the marriage happen, so he probably wouldn't even pursue it. Would a general maybe pursue a romantic relationship with a woman, but not a marriage? Yeah, that's possible, and there are cases of that happening, but he wouldn't want to marry her necessarily because odds are pretty good it would not happen. Am I saying it's impossible? No, I'm saying it's very, very unlikely, but that's beside the point. Let's keep going.
Your father, of course, had already wasted most of his wealth on alcohol and marrying off your older sisters. When he heard whispers that the church was secretly paying for young women to become nuns, he didn't think twice.
All right, now this right here is false. In fact, you got this completely backwards. Churches didn't pay people to send them daughters. It was actually the complete opposite. There were usually a couple reasons why a woman became a nun. There are 5 I can think of off the top of my head. For one, it was for a woman who wanted to pursue a spiritual vocation and devote her life to the Lord. 2, a woman who was born to aristocracy and she wanted to avoid an arranged marriage because the convent was the next best choice. 3, the family couldn't afford a marriage dowry and a convent dowry was much cheaper, so they would go with that instead to give them a life. 4, the woman was born deformed or unable to marry for a variety of reasons, or they were a widow or living in poverty, and the convent was the place they could go to because that way they could give themselves a livelihood and something to live for. And 5, the woman wanted to get an education, and the church was the best place to get a modern education at the time. Yeah, guys, the whole lie that the church was superstitious and totally counter to education and teaching, bullcrap. Complete bullcrap. In fact, the best place for a woman to get an education was the church. So if a family wanted their daughter to be educated, the convent was the best place to send them. So in the case that you're creating here, if my father wanted to send me to a convent, he would still have to pay a dowry. It would just be far cheaper than what he'd pay for a marriage dowry. So there is no, hey, we want your daughter, send them our way and we'll pay you. No, that's not how that worked. It was more of, if you want us to take in your daughter, you will have to pay a little forward so that we can afford to keep them. That's the dowry that we asked for, but it is very cheap, very manageable, and we'll still take your daughter. So this idea of churches bribing the populace for new nuns, completely false, completely inaccurate. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're probably thinking, okay, Raven, but what happens if you couldn't afford the dowry to send them to a convent? Usually in that case, they would still be accepted, but they'd be called ladies of the white veil, and their job was basically to be servants or laywomen. You know, they basically did the menial tasks around the convent and could potentially work their way up into a higher position, but that didn't normally happen. Usually there was set aside money or reward or something to make a dowry. But anyway, that's, again, beside the points. And my point here is, in many cases, women freely chose to join convents, or they went there because their family wanted them to have a better life, or they wanted an education. There were reasons you went to a dowry. None of them were bribery.
That night he kissed your forehead. God'll take care of you, love, and with this silver, I'll take care of meself, he says. The next morning, men from the church dragged you away. They shaved your head in front of everyone. Your long hair, the thing strangers once praised, dropped in piles at your feet. They shoved you into rough black cloth that smelled like mold. You caught your reflection in a brass tray. Your beauty was gone, stolen in one cruel hour.
Okay, so while it is true that many nuns did have to cut their hair, ordinarily, I don't think they had to shave all their hair. It really depends on which convent or order they're a part of. Many nunneries and convents only require the woman to have short hair. Now, there are reasons why they wanted nuns to have short hair, and the most practical one being that their hair shouldn't interfere with the veil they're wearing, because they had to wear a veil. But the more spiritual reason is that nuns, like monks and priests, take vows against vanity, and long hair could be seen as a mark of vanity. So there's the reason for that. Next, you say that the clothing smelled of mold. Again, what are you talking about? Do you think that nuns don't clean their clothes? You know that doing laundry was a thing in medieval era, right? In fact, in many convents, 2 territories regularly found were laundries and lavatoriums, where nuns would wash and clean themselves. Cleanliness was an important part of life for a nun, so what are you getting at here? And finally, as for the loss of natural beauty, well, again, if I'm a nun, I'm abandoning my previous vanity, so I shouldn't be obsessed with beauty anyway. But look, maybe it's just me. I think nuns can be gorgeous, so I don't see the problem here. So all of this seems kind of harsh, and again, not based on anything factual. But let's keep going. Let's keep going.
At the convent, you expected quiet prayers and maybe some hymns. Instead, the priest shoved a stiff brush into your hands. Scrub the entire church floor by tonight. God sees your effort. Don't disappoint him. You looked up at the vast nave, the endless stone slabs and never-ending floors. You scrubbed until your back screamed, hands blistered, knees raw against stone. When dawn came, you collapsed on the benches. The priest examined your work. Amateur work. Do better next time. Wake at 4 tomorrow morning. No excuses. This is the rule. Sleep became a luxury you could never afford. At 4 the next morning, bells rang. They dragged you into the chapel and made you kneel. 7 hours passed as Latin prayers droned. Your stomach twisted with hunger. Your knees swelled after kneeling for hours. Your head felt light.
Lord help me. All right, one at a time. So, I expected hymns and prayers. Yeah, that makes sense. I should, because those happen. You are hopefully aware that prayer, worship, and hymns are not only expected, but mandatory in the convent. In fact, you could usually break up a nun's daily schedule by the various services held throughout the day. And if you'll bear with me, I'll share them with you. A nun's day starts at 2 a.m. in the morning, where they would attend Matinus Laud, or Matins Laud, the first service of the day. After that, you would return to bed and sleep until first light. Once that happened, you would have breakfast, usually bread and beer. And yeah, I said beer. Beer was seen as safer than water at the time due to the boiling process. It wouldn't have been very strong beer, it wouldn't have had high alcoholic content, but yes, still beer. Then at about 7 was prime service, where the main service of the day was held. After this, the nuns would gather to listen to biblical scriptures and read the writings of the saints. And at 9 o'clock was tierce, after which nuns did their daily duties, which was the same as monks. They would be required to wash, clean, work, field, sew, and other daily routine chores, as well as attend lectures and occasional classroom learning opportunities, such as learning how to read and write. Then at 12 was the sextone, the fourth service, and lunch would be followed afterwards. At about this time, the nuns would eat quietly while they were given a rudimentary education or lesson from a leader, or a book was read to them. Sometimes the abbots or prioress did this. Afterwards, they would continue daily chores and routines. At 7 was vespers, the fifth service, after which they would eat a light supper, and at 9 was compline, the final service, after which the nuns went straight to bed. This, of course, is a rough outline of the daily routine, and there were certainly discrepancies and differences depending on convents' traditions and the needs of the overall community, as convents were quite close to their communities, but this gives you a rough idea of what all went on in a convent on a daily basis. It was far more than just cleaning all day, as you're laying out here. Then you say the priest made me do all this. No, priests usually only involved themselves in a convent for purposes of preaching or teaching. It was usually the abbess or head of the convent who determined daily chores, routines, and activities of the faithful sisters. In fact, the abbess would probably get pretty upset with the priest for ordering me around like that. And you finally say sleep became a luxury I can't afford. Nuns did sleep. As I just laid out, after final service, nuns went straight to bed. How could you do all your work around the convent without rest? This feels so dishonest. Then you say that I'm dragged to the chapel and forced to kneel for 7 hours. From 4 until 11, I'm on my knees? Are you serious? First of all, you know pews and chairs were used, right? You would not be asked to stay on your knees for that ridiculous amount of time. And you say that I'm hungry too. Nuns got fed, buddy. Nuns were fed. Why wouldn't they? You know male monks go through the same things, right? Most convents follow the same Benedictine orders that monks did. And monks wouldn't put up with this either. This is outrageously wrong, dude.
You noticed an apple by the altar, shining in candlelight. You reached, trembling. A sharp smack burned your hand. No food. 3-day water fast for new nuns. You must purify. It's our tradition.
No food? Are you joking? Again, nuns were allowed to eat. They ate in the morning after waking up. Are you dense? As for the 3-day water fasting, truthfully, that is something practiced, actually, but not just for spiritual purposes, but for health reasons as well, but that's beside the point. Firstly, you wouldn't just put an apple on an altar like that, especially not in a cathedral. Even if they did, the sisters would know not to mess with it. Also, you only show me here in the chapel, but there are other nuns doing this with me, right? Why am I the only one doing this? Why am I the only one suffering like this? Where are the other nuns? Why am I the only one shown here? This seems a little weird.
The nights were crueler. You lay on bare stone floor, wrapped in a curtain scrap. The wind howled through cracks, freezing your bones. Rats scurried nearby, warmer than you. You closed your eyes and wondered if this was God's plan or just the priest's amusement.
Okay, more lies. Firstly, I would not be sleeping on the floor. Remember, convents often followed the example of the Benedictine order, and according to their own order rules, quote, for bedding, the monks will need a mat, a woolen blanket, and a light covering, as well as a pillow. And according to the Cistercian rule of 1234, now hear how you should sleep. You shall always sleep in linen shirt, hose, and linen socks, and girdled with a small belt. And in your bed you shall have 3 pieces, namely a straw mattress and 2 bed sheets. Instead of a bed sheet, you could have a thin cover if the draper will give it to you. Nuns would sleep in dorters or dormitories with beds stuffed with straw. Usually they were small and confined, true, but they were also private. They wouldn't be forced to lay on the cold floor. Yes, it would likely be cold at night, but that's the case anywhere else in the world of medieval times. No indoor heating, as you know. You mentioned rats. Rats. Didn't you just go on earlier about how we have to keep the place clean? What are rats doing running around me? Wouldn't we keep the place clean and keep rats out? And then you say, I endure it even though I'm dying. Yes. Every nun is just dying when they take up the cloth. Obviously. You're so right on that. We're all just dying, which is why so many women became nuns. They just wanted to die. This is getting irritating. We're not even halfway through the video. I gotta calm down. Let's keep rolling.
You endured it, suffered it, even though you were dying. One day, you found a half-dead peasant boy outside the gates. Lips blue, body shaking. Without thinking, you slipped him apples from the storeroom. His eyes lit up with life. For a moment, you felt human again. But mercy doesn't stay hidden. A senior abbess was secretly watching you. Thief, stealing God's apples for beggars? And you say, he would have died. She says, better he die than you dishonor the convent.
What absolute nonsense is this? I mean, this isn't just ill-informed, this is actually false. Charity was paramount to the convent. According to Mark Cartwright in his article, The Daily Life of Medieval Nuns, he says, quote, nuns gave back to the community through charitable work, especially distributing clothes and food to the poor on a daily basis and giving out larger quantities on special anniversaries. Lecoq Abbey in Wiltshire, England, founded in 1232 CE by Ella, Countess of Salisbury, for example, gave out bread and herrings to 100 peasants on each anniversary of the founder's death. Besides giving out alms, nuns often acted as tutors of children. They looked after the sick, helped women in distress, and provided hospice service for the dying. And here you say that because I decide to give an apple to a starving dude, I'm getting in trouble for that? This is so blatantly false and distasteful. I'm genuinely wondering where on earth you got your information. Or did it all formulate in your own head? You leave no source or reference for the stupid straw man story you're spinning, so what the hell is this?
They dragged you to the senior priest and told him what you did. 10 days without food. Let your soul starve with your stomach. Let God show you the real value of food. Your heart sank, but then a visiting higher priest stepped in, his robes shimmering, his voice smooth. The higher priest says, service to the poor is service to God. She should be pardoned. You nearly wept with relief.
10 days without food? What kind of idiocy? First of all, you say 10 days without food, I'm sorry, when did I get food? So far I haven't eaten anything. You've made a point of pointing out that anytime I try to get food, I'm starving and they tell me I can't do it. So when was I getting food in the first place? But apparently now I'm going 10 more days without food. How am I alive? Look, there were punishments for nuns, yes, but nothing that draconian. Sometimes you had to take off your veil, which was a mark that you'd broken your vows. Sometimes you wore iron chains or some kind of physical reminder of your disobedience. Sometimes there were corporal punishments, but nothing severely harming, especially for something as simple as handing out food to the needy, which wouldn't have been punished in the first place. I mean, why is the senior priest saying I should be pardoned? There's nothing to pardon. I've done nothing wrong. I gave food to a hungry person. I'm pretty sure the rest of the convent would be going, good job, sister. You did a great job. What the heck? What is this?
But later that night, he found you in a dark corridor, and he whispered, you owe me. And you said, owe you what? Nervously. And he grinned and said, your silence, your body. God forgives sins, but I forgive punishments. You begged, you tried to run, but he grabbed you. That night your vow of chastity was stolen, not given. You lay awake after, broken, staring at the cracked ceiling, knowing even God wouldn't come down to save you.
This is disgusting. Now here's the cold reality. I'll hit you with some cold truth. This kind of thing did happen. Some priests did have relationships with nuns. It was very frowned upon, and quite often the priests faced strict punishment for it, especially if it was non-consensual. Even in the case of consensual sex, quite often the punishment was castration for the priest involved. For this reason, nuns had very little contact with males unless necessary or having to do with their daily duties. But even with these concessions, it was sometimes the case that, yes, a nun would be caught up in a scandal or sexual affair. However, it was not common or accepted at the time, and especially in the case of rape. This was not something that would be regular, not something that was common. Though it did happen, I grant you, this is not something that would happen in the typical life of a nun. So you putting it here is very much cherry-picking at best and dishonest at worst.
Weeks later, they made a spectacle of you. During a public ceremony, they dragged you forward. The priest said, confess your sins before all. And you said, but I... And the priest cut you off saying, confess! The villagers stared. You confessed to things you never did. Lust, disobedience, pride. The crowd gasped, nodded, judged. Then came the finale. They gave you a whip. The priest says, punish yourself for God. You struck your back again and again until blood seeped into your habit. The villagers crossed themselves, satisfied, as you swayed on the verge of collapse.
Self-flagellation was not a common practice for convents, and even then, why would I be dragged in public and forced to confess like this in front of everyone? See, the church often wanted to keep such things secret. If there were sexual scandals in the church, and there were, the church would do all it could to hide the matter, not expose it. Why? Because what's stopping me from accusing the priest? Further, if people look around and say, oh, that nun was unpious, maybe all the nuns are unpious, maybe there's a problem with the church, and then suddenly we have a whole issue where the community doesn't trust the church. While there's no question that some moments of sexual immorality did indeed happen, we have historical basis for it. Oftentimes, it was consensual, and it was not something the church wanted to broadcast anyway. So why on earth would I be dragged in public and made to confess to these things openly to all the people? That would not happen. It would be something quickly covered up, I guarantee you.
Months crawled by. Hunger, cold, silence, until your belly began to swell. You knew instantly whose sin this was, but no one would believe you. When the truth came out, the convent exploded with fury. The abbess, spitting, said, "Whore, you've defiled holy ground." And you said it wasn't my choice. The priest says, "Silence! You are cursed." They banished you in shame. You stumbled into the village streets, clutching your belly. People hissed, spat, called you a harlot. You begged your family to take you in, but your father, drunk, slammed the door, saying, "You failed God. You failed us. You're no daughter of mine." Tears froze on your cheeks. You found shelter in muddy barns, eating scraps thrown into pigs. Even beggars mocked you.
Okay, so now I'm pregnant, and I'm not only unable to let my side be heard, but I get kicked out, am ridiculed by the entire population, and even denied the chance to go home to my family. So let's get down to brass tacks here. First of all, nuns getting pregnant was a serious scandal, and again, something the church wanted to cover up. They would not publicize it. They would not show her to the world, because this isn't just a scandal on me now. This is a scandal on the convent and the church as a whole. In some churches, there's actually a whole social class of servants in the church made up of almost entirely children born out of illegitimate relationships with nuns or priests. These children are not looked kindly upon by the church since they were born through scandalous means, but they are guaranteed shelter and sanctuary in the church largely because the truth of their conception would bring about further shame to the church as a whole. So kicking me out and making me a pariah while showing off my pregnant belly hurts the church as well. This would not be what happened. If it did, that church would face a lot of ridicule from not only the community, but from the papacy. But for the sake of argument, just for the sake of argument, let's pretend I do get kicked out. I end up having to go all the way home, belly pregnant and reputation shamed. Would my father not take me in? I mean, I'd have nowhere else to go, and as my family, he is legally responsible for me. This is where that whole women are the property of men thing really comes in to bite you in the butt. If I'm not married and I can't go back to the convent, then it is legally my dear old daddy dearest who must take responsibility. If he doesn't, for whatever reason, my next option would be a group home of penance and repentance. Basically a home for women like me who got pregnant out of wedlock and have nowhere to turn. Believe it or not, pregnant women without a father or husband to fall back on was not uncommon in medieval times. Usually you'd fall back on a female member of the family, like a mother or sisters or cousins or an aunt or someone who knew you and could take you in. So maybe I could go to one of my sisters if my father won't take me in. Odds are pretty good he would, though. He wouldn't have much of a choice because everyone's going to be looking at him now. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to just abandon your daughter now? Like, again, this scandal spreads everywhere, which is why you keep it in-house. But let's say that even my mother, my sisters, and my father won't take me in. There are group homes. They are not ideal. They aren't great places to be, of course, but they would give me a roof over my head and a place where I could give birth to the child and hopefully figure out a path forward for us both. But again, it would probably never get that far, as the church would not want this publicized. They would basically say, look, okay, we're going to keep you here, hidden away. You can't go outside again. You're going to give birth to this baby. You can raise the baby here. We're going to raise them in the church. We're going to pretend this never happened, and you're not going to talk to anyone about this. That's usually the way that goes.
Eventually, the kingdom put you to work scrubbing noble toilets. That was survival now. Scrapping filth while nobles laughed above you.
Toilets? Toilets at this point in time? Really? Don't you mean a chamber pot or a commode chair, in which the only thing you'd have to do to clean it was take the pot and dump the contents in the designated waste area? It's not a complicated job, and surely if hired as a servant, I would be doing far more than just that. But you know what? If this is me, I'm grateful for the work. Remember, I'm pregnant with a child. I need the home, the security, and the money. Or am I not pregnant anymore? Where's the baby? And the nobles are laughing at me for this? They wouldn't laugh at me. They wouldn't care. I'm a servant. Noble houses and castles are full of them. Many of them with far darker histories than what I got.
Then the plague arrived.
What?
Then the plague arrived.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What?
Then the plague arrived.
Excuse me, I need to check. No, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear you say that. What?
Then the plague arrived.
The plague arrived. Okay, sure. The plague arrived. You said at the start of this video that this all started, my story started in 1240.
You were born in medieval England, 1240 AD.
So we're talking the dead middle of the 13th century, right? Let's be generous and say that in all that time, all this time that's gone by, from the time I went to the convent, got pregnant, got kicked out, all of that, it's been, let's say 10, 20 years. 10, 20 years of this. Okay, let's just be real generous and say it's been 20 years. So that puts us around 1250, 1260, something like that. Okay? The Black Plague hit England in 1348. Almost a whole century later. I'm dead at this point. And don't get mad at me. You're the one who said 1240 at the beginning. 1240. The Black Plague hit England at 1348. 1348. You prove evermore that you're a historical incompetent.
It crept like smoke through the streets, black boils, fever, death everywhere. The healthy fled, but outcasts like you were forced to stay. You cleaned the sores off the dying, carried bodies to pits, coughed the sickness into your own lungs.
Okay, 3 problems here, aside from the obvious ones that you got your dates messed up. First is that I'm still wearing a nun's habit. Why am I still wearing that? I got kicked out of the convent. I'm no longer a nun. I should be wearing other clothes now. Second, it was not outcasts like me who deal with the bodies. It would be doctors. So I have no reason to be near those bodies. And third, am I still pregnant? Look at the art. That belly is still very much pregnant here. Did I just not give birth for 100 years? Am I perpetually pregnant? You know, I'll give you that. That's gotta suck, man. I'm just a perma-pregnant woman with a need to dress as a nun who's lived for over 100 years. That's gotta be one hell of a rough life right there. I grant you that. Good thing it's not the life of your average nun.
Your body, already starved and fragile, broke quickly. Fever raged, your skin burned, your breath rattled. You begged for water, for mercy, for someone to just say your name kindly. None came. When you died, they didn't pray. They didn't bury. They threw your body onto a cart piled with hundreds of plague dead. The cart rumbled to the cliffs. Your body tumbled into the sea, nameless, faceless, forgotten.
Actually, most plague victims were put in mass graves. The only instance I've heard of where plague victims' bodies were dumped in the sea was during the siege of Kaffa in 1346, as reported by Gabriel de Mussis, who noted that this was because the Mongols, or the Golden Horde as he calls them, were catapulting plague bodies over the walls, and the people of Kaffa had to dump them into the sea to avoid getting sick. This was not done to bury them, but because they were in a war at the time and they just didn't have time to go through the proper disposal procedure. The reason you don't want to send plague bodies into the sea as a general rule is, for one thing, many towns are not located near the sea to do this, and for another, coastal tides and currents could move the bodies right back to the shore. So, yeah, this was not common. Furthermore, this horrid fate of being a plague victim is common for any plague victim and has nothing to do with being a nun. So, this isn't necessarily restricted to the life of a nun.
And that was your story. Born beautiful, sold for ale, chewed up by the church, abandoned by family, and swallowed by the plague. So next time someone tells you medieval times were full of romance and chivalry, remind them, sometimes it just sucked. And nothing sucked harder than being a forced nun.
All right, we're done. So, on this channel, this guy's channel, I took a look at it. His bio reads, History, Married Entertainment, and the baby born is this channel. But what I have found, and hopefully demonstrated, that this video was not historical, not entertaining, and was beyond dishonest and lacking in anything close to what should be considered intellectual truth. This entire video was one massive straw man asking the viewer to step into the fictitious shoes of a nun of the 13th century, forced to endure fabricated hardships and suffering that either were not part of the nun's typical lifestyle or were not at all common. There was no source in the video or the description to indicate where the video creator got his information, or if he was basing the story on the life of a particular nun, and absolutely no indication that this video was based on anything approaching academic integrity. This video was so poorly researched and handled, he actually claimed that my life as a nun started in 1240, but somehow I lived long enough to see the Black Plague, die from it, and was somehow still pregnant despite having been violated 100 years ago. My hope there is that he meant to say I was a nun, that I became a nun in 1340, not 1240, but still, that's something that can be easily fixed through editing. Some of you might argue that this video was done for entertainment's sake, but note his ending to the video where he says this: next time someone tells you that medieval times was full of romance and chivalry, tell them sometimes it just sucked, and nothing sucked harder than being a forced nun. To me, this reveals a desire to ridicule a historical era and even the Christian doctrine as a whole at the time. But, like I said at the beginning of this video, guys, I think there's something far darker going on underneath it all. Let me explain. This channel has only a little over 3,000 subscribers, but he only has 7 videos to his channel. He only just made his channel in April of this year. This is a relatively new channel, and so I don't normally like going after channels this young and trying to get started like this, but a cursory look at his videos tell me something disturbing. All 7 of his videos have the exact same thumbnail format, each one with seemingly an AI-generated image of a historical person, an arrow pointed at them with a clickbaity phrase like "used as a whore," "treated worse than a slave," or "this was a crime." Then the title will always indicate why it sucks to be blank in history: a Viking woman, a concubine's daughter, a medieval lesbian. No, really, that's one of the videos. In fact, the clickbaity phrase is the exact same as this video, "used as a whore." All of the videos are around the same length, and all of them seem to be of a similar strawman style anecdote trying to put you in the role of a fictitious individual to make you realize just how much your life sucks being in this predicament, always opening with a "you are a blank in this blank era." And that would be bad enough, but here comes the scary part. Here's the craziest part. It looked familiar. And I discovered there are some thumbnails out there, some videos with very similar formats. Yes, I discovered these same kinds of thumbnails and titles from other channels. The Bad Lad, Stick Tory, Bernard, Lost Legacy. All of these channels doing very similar styles of content. Very cheap and lazy manufactured style historical videos of disgustingly bad research, biased information, and all told through poor quality visuals and the same anecdotal strawman style format. In fact, a few of these channels either started around the same time, April of this year, or started making this kind of content about a month or so ago. Is this a recent trend that I haven't heard about? An attempt to lazily create easily digestible videos for the ignorant masses? If so, I'm sorry to say it's sadly working, as these channels have climbed drastically in views, and most of them have a high subscriber base. Even this channel right here, this video, though being only out for 5 days, has over 145,000 views, with over 6,000 likes to about 500 dislikes. Somehow this is appealing to people. This is disturbing. This is actually disturbing. And it's funny to me because me and my brother love history. We spend a lot of time researching and studying and trying to understand and be fair as possible with history, historicity, and sharing historical information. And we struggle to get views for that. Some of our more history-based videos struggle to get views. Whereas these videos, really? This is what people want to see? That's sad. That is really sad. I don't know if I'll be responding to any more videos like these. Probably. There's a pretty good chance more of these videos will be made, and I'll end up responding to those too, because I care about truth. I care about integrity. And to prove it, I'm going to put some of the links that I used when doing research for this video. Something that even this channel didn't do. But that's all I got time for right now. I'm tired, and I'm frustrated by the way this was handled. I'm out, guys. Take care.